The lecture hall buzzed with the sounds of a dozen different species settling into their seats. Cadet Hyun sat in the third row, his notebook already open, his pen ready. Around him, cadets built like walking tanks checked their data pads and flexed muscles that could crush steel. Hyun simply clicked his pen and waited. Commander Talvex entered the room, his 4 arms carrying multiple holographic projectors. The Gravathian instructor was massive, standing nearly 3 meters tall with blue-gray skin that looked like living stone. His eyes swept across the assembled cadets and paused briefly on Hyun. The human could see the doubt there, the same doubt he had seen for 6 months since joining the Galactic Defense Academy. "Attention," Talvex's voice boomed across the hall. "We have received a priority distress call from Outpost Kepler 7 mining colony, population of 47. They are under attack." The holographic display activated, showing a swirling mass of crystalline creatures tearing through metal walls like paper. Hyun leaned forward, his pen moving across the page. He noted the creatures' movement patterns, the way they coordinated, the spacing between their attacks. "These are Vrexil," Talvex continued. "Apex predators, silicon-based life forms with crystalline exoskeletons. They hunt in swarms and share a collective consciousness. No colony has ever survived a full Vrexil infestation." Hyun wrote faster. 6 limbs per creature, mandibles that dripped with acid, eyes that reflected light like cut diamonds. He sketched a quick diagram marking what appeared to be joint weak points. "Sir, what about the colonists?" The voice came from Cadet Mirai, sitting 2 seats away from Hyun. She was human like him, but where Hyun was slim and average height, Mirai was built strong, with shoulders that came from years of heavy weapons training back on Earth. "Unknown," Talvex said. "All senior officers are currently deployed on the border conflicts. The rescue mission falls to you. The Academy cadets." The room erupted in excited chatter. Cadet Brock, a Therantian who resembled an enormous rhinoceros walking upright, slammed his fist on his desk. "Finally! Real combat." Hyun kept writing. He noted that the Vrexil attacked in waves of 7 to 9 individuals. He noted that they seemed to avoid certain frequencies of light. He noted that their exoskeletons left residue that sparkled even in low light. "Cadet Hyun," Talvex's voice cut through the noise. The room went quiet. "Are you taking notes?" "Yes, sir," Hyun replied without looking up. "This is a combat deployment, not a research expedition." "Yes, sir." "I understand, sir." Hyun's pen continued moving. Talvex's mandibles clicked in what might have been frustration. Humans, always scribbling, always documenting. "Tell me, Cadet, when a Vrexil is tearing through your chest, will your notebook stop it?" Hyun looked up then, meeting the commander's eyes calmly. "No, sir, but knowing where to strike before it reaches my chest might." Several cadets laughed. Brock snorted loudly. "The human thinks he can outthink a predator that has hunted for millions of years, typical." Mirai shot Brock a glare, but Hyun simply returned to his notes. He had learned long ago that proving himself through arguments was pointless. Proof came from results. The briefing continued. Talvex displayed detailed anatomical scans of the Vrexil. Their bodies were engineering marvels, evolved for perfect killing efficiency. Their exoskeletons could withstand small arms fire. Their acid could melt through combat armor in seconds. Their coordination allowed them to strike from multiple angles simultaneously. Hyun filled 4 pages with observations. He noted that the neural cluster appeared to be located behind the 3rd and 4th limbs, not in the head as most species. He noted that their sensory organs seemed particularly developed, suggesting they relied heavily on chemical signals. He noted that their crystalline structure had a specific lattice pattern, regular and precise. "You will deploy in 3 teams," Talvex announced. "Heavy assault led by Cadet Brock, rescue and evacuation led by Cadet Mirai, and reconnaissance which will include Cadet Hyun and Vesh." A tentacled Quelon near the back raised one appendage. That was Vesh, whose species communicated partially through color changes in their skin. Right now he was showing deep purple, which meant concern. "Sir," Vesh's voice bubbled like water over stones. "Reconnaissance is the most dangerous assignment. We will be entering the Vrexil nest zones alone." "Correct," Talvex said, "which is why I am assigning our most observant cadet to that team." Hyun felt several eyes turn toward him. Was that respect in the commander's voice? Or was it a test? Perhaps both. After the briefing, cadets flooded to the armory. Brock selected a plasma cannon that most species needed a vehicle mount to carry. Mirai chose her favorite weapon, a multi-barrel assault system that fired 3 types of ammunition. Other cadets grabbed rifles, grenades, energy shields, and combat knives that looked like short swords. Hyun selected a standard-issue sidearm, a combat knife, and a survival kit. Then he checked his notebook and his pen, making sure both were secure in his vest pocket. "That's all you're taking?" Mirai approached him, her own armor already loaded with enough ammunition to fight a small war. "Hyun, we're going against hundreds of these things." "I know," Hyun said quietly. He patted his notebook. "This is my real weapon." Mirai shook her head but smiled. They had trained together since the first week of academy. She had seen him turn training exercises into learning opportunities, watched him defeat opponents twice his size by studying their patterns and exploiting weaknesses. But this was different. This was real. "Just stay alive, okay?" Mirai said. "Earth sent so few of us out here. We need to stick together." "I will," Hyun promised. "You too." The dropship departed an hour later. 12 cadets, all that could be spared, hurtling through space toward a mining outpost that was probably already a tomb. Hyun sat near the window watching the stars blur past, his notebook open on his lap. He reviewed everything he had learned about the Vrexil. They were perfect predators, yes, but perfect also meant predictable. Patterns could be learned. Weaknesses could be found. Evolution optimized for specific environments, which meant there were always trade-offs, always vulnerabilities. Vesh slithered over, his tentacles gripping the safety rails. His skin had shifted to a calmer blue-green. "You are not afraid, Hyun?" "I am afraid," Hyun admitted. "Fear keeps you alert, but panic kills you faster than any predator." "The others think humans are weak," Vesh said. "Soft skin, no natural weapons, slow compared to most species." "They're right," Hyun said. "We are all those things." "Then why do you stay calm?" Hyun looked at his pen, turning it slowly in his fingers. It was a simple tool, barely more advanced than what humans had used for centuries. Metal barrel, ink cartridge, spring-loaded tip. Nothing special. "Because humans learned something a long time ago," Hyun said. "We are not the strongest or fastest. We are not the most armored or the most deadly. But we can learn. We can adapt. We can take what we observe and turn it into something new. That is what makes us dangerous." The dropship shuddered as it entered the asteroid field where Kepler-7 was located. Through the window, Hyun could see the outpost growing larger. Even from this distance, he could see the damage. The outer walls were torn open. Crystalline webbing stretched between structures like frozen lightning. Commander Talvex's voice crackled over the communication system. "Approach with caution. Sensors are detecting massive Vrexil presence. Perhaps 200 individuals. Maybe more. 200. Hyun wrote the number in his notebook. Below it, he wrote another number, 12. The odds were not good, but odds were just mathematics, and mathematics could be changed with the right variables. Hyun clicked his pen closed and opened it again, a habit when he was thinking deeply. Mirai caught his eye from across the passenger bay. She looked worried. Brock was checking his plasma cannon, muttering what sounded like a prayer in his native language. Vesh's skin had gone pale, almost white. Hyun looked back at his notebook. On the last page he had filled, he had drawn a detailed sketch of a Vrexil warrior. Around it, he had marked 13 different points on its body, 13 places where its crystalline armor was thinner, where joints needed flexibility, where sensory organs clustered. The dropship began its final descent. Hyun could hear the docking clamps engaging, the airlock cycling. In moments, they would step into a nest of the galaxy's most efficient killers. He tucked his notebook into his vest pocket, making sure it was secure. Then he checked his pen one more time. The metal was cool against his fingers. Solid. Real. The airlock door opened. The smell hit them first, a sharp chemical scent that burned the nose. Then came the sounds, the clicking and chittering of Vrexil communication echoing through the damaged corridors. "Move out," Talvex's voice commanded. "Stay in your teams. Report all contact. And cadets, stay alive. That is an order." Hyun stepped forward with the others, his hand resting lightly on his sidearm, but his mind was already working, already observing, already turning the nightmare ahead into data he could use. The hunt had begun, but Hyun intended to make sure that humanity was the predator, not the prey. The interior of Kepler-7 looked like something from a nightmare. Emergency lights flickered red, casting shadows that moved like living things. The metal walls were scored with deep gouges where Vrexil claws had carved through steel. In some places, the crystalline acid had eaten completely through bulkheads, leaving holes that dripped with residue that sparkled in the dim light. Hyun knelt beside one of the gouges, pulling out his notebook. The scratches were evenly spaced, exactly 14 centimeters apart. He measured with his fingers, then wrote the measurement down. Consistent spacing meant consistent limb structure. Consistent structure meant predictable reach and strike zones. "Hyun, keep moving," Vesh whispered urgently. The Quelon's tentacles were wrapped tight around his rifle, his skin flashing nervous yellow patterns. "One moment," Hyun said. He pulled a small sample container from his kit and carefully scraped some of the acid residue into it. The substance was thick, almost gel-like, and it gave off a faint chemical smell that reminded him of burnt plastic. Brock's voice boomed through the communication system. "Heavy assault team is moving to the mining sector. These tunnels are clear so far. Too clear. Rescue team proceeding to the residential quarters," Mireille reported. Her voice was steady, professional. "We have signs of barricades. Someone tried to make a stand here." Hyun and Vesh moved deeper into the ventilation system. This was the route Hyun had chosen after studying the outpost's layout during the dropship flight. The ventilation shafts ran throughout the entire facility, offering access to every section. They were also the perfect hunting ground for Vrexil, which is exactly why Hyun wanted to be there. "You realize we are walking into their nest?" Vesh said, his skin pulsing deep purple with fear. "I know," Hyun replied. "That's why we're here. To learn how they nest, how they move, how they think." The ventilation shaft was barely wide enough for them to move through on hands and knees. Hyun went first, his flashlight sweeping ahead. Every few meters he stopped to examine the walls. He found more claw marks, more acid burns, and something new, a thin, almost invisible webbing that stretched across the shaft like a spider's work. He pulled out his pen and gently touched the webbing. It stuck to the metal tip immediately, and when he tried to pull the pen away, the webbing stretched but did not break. He wrote in his notebook with his other hand. "Webbing, high tensile strength, adhesive properties." "Possible alarm system?" Vesh's skin went pale white. "Alarm system?" Before Hyun could answer, a shriek echoed through the ventilation shaft. It was a sound like metal scraping against glass, high and piercing. Both of them froze. "Contact!" Brock's voice exploded through the communication system. "Heavy assault is engaged. Multiple hostiles. They came through the walls." They came through the transmission dissolved into weapons fire and screaming. Hyun pressed himself against the shaft wall, his mind racing. He pulled up the outpost map on his wrist display. Brock's team was 300 meters away in the mining sector. The Vrexil had ambushed them from multiple directions simultaneously. "We need to help them," Vesh said, already starting to turn around in the tight space. "Wait," Hyun said. He was accessing the security camera feeds, his fingers flying across the small screen. Most cameras were offline, but a few still functioned. He found one with a view of the mining sector. What he saw made his blood run cold. The heavy assault team was surrounded by at least 20 Vrexil warriors. The creatures moved with horrifying coordination, attacking in perfect synchronization. One would strike high while another struck low. When a cadet fired at one Vrexil, two others would flank from the sides. But Hyun forced himself to watch, to observe, to learn. He saw the pattern. The Vrexil would attack, then pause for exactly 2.3 seconds, then attack again. During that pause, they would adjust their positions based on where their swarm mates were striking. "There's a delay," Hyun muttered, writing quickly. "They communicate, but there's a processing delay. 2.3 seconds, what does that matter?" Vesh's tentacles were shaking. "They are dying!" On the screen, a Vrexil warrior caught a cadet with its mandibles. Acid sprayed. The cadet's shields failed. Hyun forced himself to keep watching, keep analyzing. The other Vrexil paused after the kill, regrouping, and then continued their coordinated assault. "Chemical signals," Hyun said. "They communicate through pheromones. That's why there's a delay. The signal has to spread through the air." Brock's plasma cannon fired, the bright blue energy cutting through two Vrexil warriors. Their crystalline bodies shattered, spraying fragments everywhere. But more creatures poured in from the tunnels. "Heavy assault is falling back," Brock gasped through the communications. 4 cadets down. "We need support." "Rescue team is pinned down," Mireille's voice cut in. She sounded out of breath. "We found survivors, but Vrexil have blocked our exit route. We are trapped in the residential section." Hyun's mind worked rapidly. 3 teams all separated. The Vrexil had deliberately split them up. This was not random hunting. This was strategy. Commander Talvex, Hyun spoke into his communicator. The Vrexil are coordinating this attack. They are not just hunting. They are isolating us. Talvex's response was broken by static. Understood. Dropship under attack. Cannot maintain orbit. Communication breaking. The transmission died. Silence filled Hyun's helmet. They were cut off. No reinforcements. No extraction. 12 cadets against hundreds of apex predators. Vesh's skin had gone completely gray, the color of fear and despair for his species. We are going to die here. Hyun closed his notebook and looked at his companion. Maybe, but I am not going to die without learning everything I can first. He turned back to the security feeds, switching between cameras. Most showed empty corridors. Some showed Vrexil warriors patrolling. But one camera, deep in the maintenance sublevel, showed something different. A chamber. Massive. And in the center of Vrexil, unlike any he had seen in the briefings, it was enormous, easily 12 meters long, with an exoskeleton that pulsed with internal light. Around it, smaller Vrexil brought what looked like chunks of machinery, feeding their queen. The queen, Hyun whispered. He took a screenshot with his wrist display, then began sketching her in his notebook. She never moved from her central position. Around her, crystalline structures grew from the floor and ceiling, connecting to her body like cables. She is the hub, Hyun said, his pen moving rapidly across the page. The center of their hive mind. She processes the information and sends out commands. How does that help us survive? Vesh asked. I don't know yet, Hyun admitted. But information is never useless. A sound from ahead made them both freeze. Click, click, click. The sound of crystalline claws on metal. Something was in the ventilation shaft with them. Hyun killed his flashlight. In the darkness, he could hear the clicking getting closer. He could smell that burnt plastic scent growing stronger. His hand moved to his sidearm, but he did not draw it yet. The security camera on his wrist display showed a Vrexil warrior entering the ventilation shaft from a junction 50 meters ahead. It was moving toward them, its diamond eyes reflecting the faint emergency lights. Hyun's mind raced through options. The shaft was too narrow to fight effectively. They could retreat, but the Vrexil was faster. They could try to hide, but the creature would likely detect them through chemical sensors. Then he remembered something from his notes. The Vrexil were attracted to heat and electrical signatures. His wrist display was giving off both. He powered it down. In the complete darkness, the clicking stopped. Silence stretched for 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then the clicking resumed, but it was moving away. The Vrexil was following a different heat signature, probably from the fighting in other sections. Vesh's skin flickered with faint bioluminescence, a sign of relief. How did you know? The briefing mentioned they hunted by electrical signatures, Hyun whispered. I took notes. They continued through the ventilation system, moving slowly and carefully. Hyun's mind was cataloging everything. The spacing of the webbing traps, the patrol patterns of the warriors, the way the Vrexil avoided certain areas where electromagnetic interference was high. Mirai's voice suddenly came through the communicator, weak and distorted. Rescue team has secured 3 survivors, but we lost 2 cadets. The Vrexil are using some kind of webbing to seal the exits. We are completely trapped. Hyun pulled up the outpost map again. The residential section where Mirai was trapped had 6 possible exits. If the Vrexil were sealing them with webbing, that meant they were planning something. Vrexil did not take prisoners. They consumed prey. The webbing takes time to deploy, Hyun said into his communicator. Can you estimate how long before they finish sealing all exits? Maybe 30 minutes, Mirai responded. Why? Because that tells us how long before they attack in full force, Hyun said. They are not sealing you in to trap you. They are sealing you in to contain you while they gather their swarm. Brock's voice joined the communication. Heavy assault has retreated to the central hub. 5 cadets remaining. We have wounded. Ammunition at 40%. Hyun checked his map. The central hub was the heart of the outpost, a large open area where all the main corridors connected. It was defensible, but it was also a dead end. The central hub of Kepler 7 had become a fortress of desperation. Brock and the remaining heavy assault cadets had dragged equipment to create barricades. Broken mining machinery, overturned tables, even pieces of torn bulkhead were stacked to form defensive walls. Behind these makeshift barriers, 5 cadets prepared for what they knew might be their final stand. Vesh arrived through the ventilation shaft. tumbling out onto the floor with Hyun's notes clutched in his tentacles. Brock stared at the pages, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he took them. "Where is Hyun?" Brock demanded. "He went to help Mirei's team," Vesh said, his skin pulsing exhausted gray, "and to check something near the Queen's chamber." Brock's eyes widened. "That fool? He will get himself killed." One of the other cadets, an insectoid Clixon named Sora, clicked her mandibles nervously. "We should worry about ourselves. Listen." They all went quiet. From the corridors surrounding the hub came the sound of clicking. Hundreds of clicks growing louder. The Vrexil were gathering. Meanwhile, in the residential section, Mirei crouched behind an overturned bed frame with 3 terrified colonists and 1 other cadet. The colonists were mining engineers, not fighters. They trembled as the sound of Vrexil movement echoed through the sealed corridors. "How much longer?" one colonist whispered. Mirei checked her ammunition counter. "Not long enough." Then she heard something in the ventilation shaft above them. Scraping. Movement. She raised her weapon, aiming at the vent cover. The cover burst open and Hyun dropped through, landing in a crouch. His uniform was torn and covered in the crystalline dust from Vrexil webbing. "Hyun," Mirei lowered her weapon. "You are insane. How did you get through?" "The Vrexil patrol in patterns," Hyun said, pulling out his pen and a small flask from his survival kit. "I timed it. We have maybe 5 minutes before they finish sealing this section and attack." "We cannot break through the webbing," Mirei said. "It is too strong." "We tried." Hyun opened the flask. Inside was the acid residue he had collected earlier. The Vrexil's own acid should dissolve their webbing. Chemical compatibility. He moved to the nearest sealed exit where thick crystalline webbing blocked the doorway. Using his pen, he carefully applied the acid to the webbing. It hissed and bubbled, and the webbing began to dissolve. "Everyone, get ready to move," Hyun said. "When this opens, we run. Do not stop. Do not fight unless you must. Just run to the central hub." The webbing dissolved enough to create a gap. Hyun went through first, his sidearm drawn. The corridor beyond was empty, but he could hear the Vrexil gathering on the other side of the residential section. "Now," he hissed. Mirei pushed the colonists through first, then followed with the other cadet. They ran through the corridors, following the path Hyun had memorized from the outpost map. Behind them, an alarm shriek split the air. The Vrexil had discovered their escape. They burst into the central hub just as the first Vrexil warriors appeared at the corridor entrances. Brock's plasma cannon roared, cutting down 3 creatures instantly. The other cadets opened fire, creating a wall of energy and bullets. Hyun helped the colonists behind the barricades, then turned to see the situation. It was worse than he feared. Vrexil warriors were pouring in from every corridor, at least 50 visible, with more coming. The cadets' weapons were effective, but ammunition would not last. "We need a better plan than shooting until we die," Mirei said, slamming a fresh power cell into her weapon. Hyun looked at the notes Vesh had brought. Then he looked around the central hub. It was a large circular room with a high ceiling. Industrial equipment lined the walls. Power conduits. Emergency systems. And most importantly, the main communications array. "The dropship," Hyun said suddenly. It had an industrial 3D printer. "For emergency repairs." "The dropship is gone," Brock growled, firing another burst. "We saw it retreat." "But it uploaded its emergency supplies manifest to the outpost computer before it left," Hyun said. He was already moving to one of the computer terminals. Standard procedure. His fingers flew across the keyboard. The system was damaged but functional. He accessed the emergency supplies database. There it was. The 3D printer was designed to create replacement parts for ship systems. It could work with multiple materials, including metals, polymers, and ceramics. "I need all available power cells," Hyun said. "And somebody's tuning fork." Everyone stared at him. "Tuning fork?" Vesh's skin flashed confused purple. "You have one," Hyun said, pointing at Vesh. "The ceremonial crystal one you carry for your meditation rituals." Vesh's tentacles reached into his equipment pack and pulled out a small, perfectly clear crystal shaped like a tuning fork. It was a traditional item for Kelon, used in their religious practices. "What are you planning?" Mirei asked, firing at a Vrexil that had gotten too close to their barricade. Hyun took the tuning fork and struck it against the metal terminal. It rang with a pure, clear note that seemed to vibrate in the bones. Several Vrexil warriors near the entrance stumbled, their movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. They're exoskeletons, Hyun said, his eyes bright with realization. They have a crystalline lattice structure. This fork resonates at a frequency that disrupts that lattice. He pulled out his pen and disassembled it quickly. The ink cartridge came free, along with the spring mechanism and the metal barrel. Then he accessed the 3D printer through the terminal. I am going to need time, Hyun said. Maybe 10 minutes. We do not have 10 minutes. Sora screeched as a Vrexil warrior's acid sprayed across her shield. Then make time, Hyun said calmly, his fingers already designing something on the computer. The battle intensified. Brock's plasma cannon overheated, and he switched to his backup rifle. Mirai's ammunition counter ticked down steadily. The other cadets fought with everything they had, but the Vrexil kept coming. Hyun worked frantically at the terminal. He was designing a weapon, but not a traditional one. The 3D printer hummed to life, beginning to fabricate something. Hyun, what is that thing? Vesh asked, his tentacles protecting Hyun's position from incoming acid spray. A delivery system, Hyun said. He had the printer creating hollow-tipped darts, small and aerodynamic. Each one had a chamber inside designed to hold liquid. While the printer worked, Hyun opened his pen's ink cartridge. The ink inside was a polymer-based fluid, organic chemistry that was completely incompatible with silicon-based life forms. He had remembered something from basic xenobiology class that most cadets ignored. Organic polymers could disrupt silicon-based neural functions. But more than that, he had noticed something about the Vrexil communication. They used pheromones, and pheromones were chemical signals that could be scrambled by the right interference. The 3D printer finished the first batch of darts. Hyun carefully filled each one with ink from his cartridge, then added a small amount of the Vrexil acid he had collected. The mixture bubbled slightly but stabilized. I need a projectile launcher, Hyun said. Something with compressed air. Emergency respirators, Mirai said, pointing to a supply locker. They have compressed air canisters. Hyun grabbed one and quickly modified it, using the metal barrel from his pen as the firing tube. It was crude but functional. He loaded one of his modified darts into the barrel. A Vrexil warrior broke through the barricade on the eastern side. It moved with terrifying speed, its mandibles open and dripping acid. Before anyone could react, Hyun aimed his makeshift weapon and fired. The dart hit the Vrexil behind its third and fourth limbs, exactly where Hyun's notes indicated the neural cluster was located. The creature froze mid-stride. Then it began to convulse, its movements becoming random and chaotic. More importantly, the other Vrexil near it began to scatter in confusion. Their coordinated attack pattern dissolved into random individual actions. The ink disrupts their pheromone signals, Hyun explained quickly. It scrambles their communication. He fired again, hitting another Vrexil. The same effect. The creature's coordination failed and the swarm around it lost cohesion. We need more of these, Brock said, understanding dawning in his eyes. Much more. The printer can make more darts, Hyun said. But we need more ink. And we need to amplify the crystal's resonance to affect multiple Vrexil at once. Mirai was already moving. The outpost's public address system. It is designed to broadcast sounds throughout the entire facility. Hyun nodded. Connect the crystal to it. The resonance should affect every Vrexil in range. While Mirai worked on the PA system, Hyun continued producing darts. The other cadets began coating their weapons with the ink mixture, turning ordinary bullets and energy blasts into swarm-disrupting ammunition. The tide of battle began to shift. Each Vrexil hit with the modified ammunition would lose coordination, disrupting the creatures around it. The perfect synchronization of the swarm started to break down into individual, much less effective attacks. Then Mirai activated the PA system. Vesh's crystal, connected to the speakers, began broadcasting its resonance frequency throughout the outpost. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Vrexil warriors throughout the hub stumbled and fell. Their crystalline exoskeletons began to show hairline fractures. They were not dead, but they were vulnerable. Their perfect armor compromised. The maintenance sublevel of Kepler-7 was a place designed for machines, not living things. The corridors were narrow and filled with pipes carrying coolant and waste. The air was thick with chemical smells and the hum of failing generators. And somewhere deep in this mechanical labyrinth, the Vrexil Queen waited. Hyun led a team of 7 cadets through the access tunnels. They had voted on who would go on this mission. 7 volunteered. 5 stayed behind to guard the survivors and maintain the central hub's defenses. Mirai walked beside Hyun, her weapon loaded with ink-coated ammunition. Brock followed, moving surprisingly quietly for someone his size. Vesh was there too, along with Sora and 2 other cadets, a serpentine Rolth named Kima and a crystalline being called Dex. According to the security feeds, the Queen's chamber is 3 levels down, Hyun whispered, checking his wrist display. The map showed a complex path through maintenance shafts and coolant tunnels. They moved in silence, following Hyun's carefully planned route. He had studied the Vrexil patrol patterns for hours, noting when and where the warriors moved. The path he chose would avoid the heaviest concentrations of enemies. But avoiding all enemies was impossible. They encountered their first Vrexil warrior in a coolant tunnel. The creature was larger than the ones they had fought before, its exoskeleton darker and thicker. It saw them and released a chemical alarm signal. Hyun fired first. His dart struck the Vrexil's neural cluster, and the creature's movements became erratic. But it did not fall. This one was stronger, more resilient. Mireille's modified ammunition tore through its weakened armor. The Vrexil collapsed, but its alarm had been sent. They heard answering clicks echoing through the tunnels. "Move faster," Hyun urged. They ran through the maintenance corridors, taking turns Hyun had memorized. Behind them, the clicking sounds multiplied. The swarm was responding to the alarm. "There," Hyun pointed to a shaft leading downward. "That drops directly into the maintenance sublevel. It bypasses the main Vrexil patrol routes." "It is a 15-meter drop," Kima hissed, her forked tongue tasting the air nervously. "I know," Hyun said. He was already securing a cable from his survival kit to a pipe. "We rappel down, fast." One by one, they descended into the darkness. Hyun went last, cutting the cable after him so the Vrexil could not easily follow. They dropped into a wide chamber filled with massive generators and coolant tanks, and between the generators they saw their first glimpse of the Queen's lair. The chamber was cathedral-like in size, carved from the asteroid's rock. Crystalline structures grew from floor to ceiling like frozen trees. They glowed with internal light, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat, and at the center of it all, connected to dozens of these crystalline pillars by organic cables, was the Queen. She was enormous, 12 meters of crystalline armor and powerful limbs. Her exoskeleton was different from the warriors, more complex, with patterns that seemed to shift and flow. Her eyes, dozens of them, reflected light like mirrors. Around her, elite guard Vrexil patrolled. These were different from any they had encountered. Larger, faster, with armor that seemed to shimmer with energy. There were at least 20 of them. "We cannot fight through that," Brock whispered. Hyun studied the scene carefully. He pulled out his notebook, the one thing he had carried through every battle, and flipped through his observations. His eyes moved from his notes to the Queen to the crystalline structures connecting her to the swarm. "We do not need to fight through them," Hyun said slowly. "We need to cut her connection to the swarm." "What do you mean?" Mireille asked. Hyun pointed at the crystalline structures. "She is not just leading the swarm. She is the swarm. Those structures conduct the pheromone signals throughout the outpost. She receives information from every Vrexil and sends back commands. But if we sever those connections, the swarm loses coordination permanently." Vesh finished, his skin brightening with understanding. "Exactly," Hyun said. "But there is a problem. Those guards are different from the warriors we have been fighting. Look at their exoskeletons." The others looked closer. The guard Vrexil had armor that seemed to absorb the resonance from Vesh's crystal instead of fracturing from it. "They have adapted," Sora clicked nervously. "Evolution at work." "No," Hyun said, studying them carefully. "Not evolution, selection. The Queen chose guards that are resistant to the frequency that affects normal Vrexil. She learned from our attacks and adapted her defenses." "Then how do we kill her?" Dex asked, his crystalline body chiming softly. Hyun was quiet for a long moment, thinking. His pen turned slowly in his fingers, a habit when he was working through a difficult problem. Then his eyes widened slightly. "We do not kill her," Hyun said. "We disconnect her." He explained his plan quickly. It was insane. It required someone to get close to the Queen, close enough to touch the crystalline structure she was connected to, and that someone would have to survive long enough to sever the connections. "That is suicide," Kima hissed. "Yes," Hyun agreed. "Which is why I will do it alone. The rest of you create a distraction." "No," Mireille said firmly. "We came as a team. We fight as a team." "She is right," Brock added. "We do not leave warriors behind." Hyun looked at their faces and saw determination. These cadets from a dozen different species had bonded through battle. They trusted him. More importantly, they trusted each other. Then we do it together, Hyun said. But we do it smart. The plan was simple in concept but difficult in execution. Mirai, Brock, and the others would attack from the main entrance, drawing the guards' attention. Meanwhile, Hyun and Vesh would use the coolant pipes that ran along the ceiling to approach from above. They synchronized their wrist displays. On Hyun's signal, the attack would begin. Hyun and Vesh climbed into the coolant pipes, moving silently above the Queen's chamber. The pipes were freezing cold and slick with condensation. Hyun's fingers went numb, but he kept moving. Below them, the Queen rested in her web of crystalline connections. She did not move, but Hyun could see the subtle shifting of colors in her exoskeleton. She was thinking, processing information from thousands of Vrexil throughout the outpost. Hyun's wrist display counted down. 3, 2, 1. The attack began with Mirai's heavy weapon opening fire. Energy blasts tore through the chamber, striking the elite guards. Brock's plasma cannon roared. The guards responded instantly, moving with perfect coordination to counter the threat. While the guards were distracted, Hyun dropped from the pipe. He fell 3 meters and landed on one of the crystalline structures connecting to the Queen. The impact jarred every bone in his body, but he held on. The Queen's massive head turned toward him. Dozens of eyes focused on the tiny human clinging to her neural connection. She shrieked, a sound that made Hyun's ears ring even through his helmet. Elite guards broke off from fighting the others and rushed toward Hyun. But Vesh dropped from the pipes as well, landing between Hyun and the approaching guards. The Quellan opened fire with his modified weapon, the ink-coated ammunition disrupting the guards' coordination. Hyun pulled out his pen. Not the launcher, the original pen, just a simple writing instrument with a metal tip and organic ink inside. He jabbed the pen into the crystalline structure. The metal tip scratched the surface but did not penetrate deeply. The Queen thrashed, trying to throw him off, but he held on desperately. "It is not working," Hyun shouted. An elite guard reached Vesh, its mandibles snapping. The Quellan dodged, but barely. He would not be able to hold them off much longer. Hyun looked at the pen in his hand. Then he looked at the crystalline structure. He remembered his notes. Silicon-based lattice structure, and his pen's ink was an organic polymer. Incompatible chemistry. He did not need to cut through the crystal. He needed to poison it. Hyun crushed the pen's ink cartridge directly against the crystalline surface. The blue ink spread across the structure, seeping into microscopic cracks. Where the ink touched, the crystal began to change color, turning dark and cloudy. The Queen screamed again, louder this time. The crystalline structure Hyun was clinging to started to fracture. The organic ink was corrupting the silicon-based material, causing cascading failures in the lattice structure. "More!" Hyun shouted. "I need more ink." Mirai understood. She tossed him her survival kit. Inside were 3 more pens, standard issue for all cadets. Hyun caught the kit and immediately broke open all the pens, pouring their ink onto different crystalline connections. The effect spread like a disease. Crystal after crystal turned dark and began to crack. The Queen thrashed wildly now, her connection to the swarm failing. Around the chamber, the elite guards suddenly lost their perfect coordination, their movements becoming individual and confused. But Hyun had underestimated one thing: the Queen herself. Cut off from her swarm, she was still a massive, powerful predator, and she was angry. One of her enormous limbs swung at Hyun. He barely jumped aside, landing hard on the chamber floor. Pain shot through his ankle. Probably broken. The Queen advanced toward him, her mandibles opening. Acid dripped from them, sizzling on the floor. Hyun tried to stand, but his ankle gave out. The journey back to the central hub took 2 hours. Hyun limped the entire way, supported by Mirai on one side and Vesh on the other. His broken ankle throbbed with each step, but he refused to stop. They could still hear Vrexil in the corridors, though the creatures now moved randomly instead of with their previous terrifying coordination. When they finally reached the hub, they found the remaining cadets had been busy. The disoriented Vrexil warriors had been systematically eliminated, their bodies piled near the barricades. The 3 colonists sat huddled together, alive but traumatized. Sora saw them first. "They return," she clicked excitedly. "And they are alive." Brock set down his plasma cannon and approached Hyun. The massive Thorantian knelt so that his eyes were level with the injured human. Then slowly and deliberately, he touched his forehead with his fist again. "You led us against the Queen herself," Brock said. You turned a pen into a weapon that killed an apex predator. You saved all our lives." He paused, then added something that seemed difficult for him to say. "I was wrong about humans. About you. Strength is not just physical. Today you showed me what true strength looks like." Other cadets gathered around, showing their own species signs of respect. Dex's crystalline body chimed a harmonic song. Kima performed a serpentine dance of honor. Even the surviving colonists stood and bowed. Hyun felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. "I just took notes and tried to solve problems. Any of you could have done the same." "No," Mirai said firmly. "We could not. You saw patterns we missed. You understood the Vrexil in a way we did not. You took a simple tool and changed everything." The communicator on Hyun's wrist suddenly crackled to life. Commander Talvex's voice came through, weak but clear. "Cadet team, respond. This is Commander Talvex. The dropship has returned. Are there survivors?" Hyun lifted his wrist. "This is Cadet Hyun. 10 cadets survived. 3 colonists recovered. The Vrexil swarm has been neutralized." There was a long pause. Then Talvex said, "Repeat that last part." "The Vrexil swarm has been neutralized, sir. The queen is dead. The remaining warriors are disorganized and being eliminated." Another pause, even longer. "We are approaching the outpost now. Prepare for extraction, and Cadet Hyun, well done." The dropship docked an hour later. Commander Talvex entered the hub with a medical team and additional security forces. He stopped in the entrance, looking at the scene before him. Dead Vrexil everywhere. Exhausted cadets covered in crystalline dust and acid burns, and in the center a human cadet with a broken ankle, sitting against a barricade writing in a notebook. Talvex approached Hyun slowly. "Give me your report, Cadet." Hyun stood as best he could, wincing at the pain in his ankle. "Sir, the Vrexil operate as a hive mind controlled by a queen. They communicate through pheromone signals conducted by crystalline structures. We discovered that organic polymers disrupt their silicon-based biology. We used standard pen ink to corrupt the queen's neural connections, then used resonance frequencies to weaken her exoskeleton. The queen was eliminated along with her guard variants. Remaining warriors are now operating as individuals without coordination." Talvex's forearms crossed as he listened. "You discovered all of this during combat?" "Yes, sir. Through observation and testing hypotheses." "And you weaponized a pen?" "Yes, sir. Multiple pens, actually." Talvex looked at Brock, who nodded confirmation. Then the commander did something Hyun had never seen him do. He smiled. "Cadet Hyun, in my 40 years of military service, I have never encountered a more unconventional tactical solution. You took academy training, basic supplies, and pure human stubbornness, and you defeated a threat that has destroyed colonies with 10 times your numbers and firepower." He picked up Hyun's notebook. The page is now filled with sketches, observations, chemical formulas, and tactical notes. "May I?" Hyun nodded. Talvex read through the pages carefully. His expression changed from curiosity to surprise to something that might have been awe. "This is remarkable. You documented everything. Weak points, chemical compositions, behavioral patterns, attack frequencies. You turned combat into a research study." "Information is the foundation of good decisions, sir," Hyun said simply. Talvex closed the notebook and handed it back. "This will be studied at the academy. Your methods will be taught to future cadets." He paused, then added, "I doubted humans when you arrived. I saw your species as physically weak, unsuited for combat. I was a fool." "You were using the information you had, sir," Hyun said. "Humans are physically weaker than most species. That is just a fact. But we compensate in other ways. By learning," Talvex said. "By adapting. By refusing to give up even when victory seems impossible." The medical team began treating the injured cadets. A doctor examined Hyun's ankle and confirmed it was broken. They fitted him with a temporary brace and gave him medication for the pain. As they prepared to evacuate the outpost, Mirai sat down next to Hyun. "So what happens now? Back to the academy?" "I hope so," Hyun said. "I have a lot to write about. The Vrexil were just one species. There are thousands more in the galaxy, each one with their own strengths and weaknesses. You want to study them all?" Mirai laughed. "Someone should," Hyun said seriously. "Knowledge saves lives. Today proved that." Vesh approached, his tentacles carrying something. "Hyun, I wanted to give you this." He held out his crystal tuning fork. "It belongs to you now. Without your idea to use it, we would all be dead." "I cannot take your ceremonial item," Hyun protested. Please, Vesh insisted. For my people, this crystal represents wisdom and harmony. You showed both today. It should be yours. Hyun accepted the crystal carefully. It felt warm in his hand, still humming faintly with resonance. Thank you, Vesh. I will treasure it. The trip back to the academy took 3 days. During that time, Hyun wrote a detailed report of everything that had happened. He included diagrams, chemical formulas, tactical recommendations, and observations about each cadet's performance. When they arrived at the academy, they found a crowd waiting. News of their victory had traveled fast. Cadets from every species lined the docking bay, watching as the survivors disembarked. Hyun was the last to leave the dropship, limping on his injured ankle. He expected to quietly slip past the crowd to the medical center. Instead, the cadets began to applaud. The sound started soft but grew louder until the entire docking bay thundered with it. Brock stood beside Hyun and spoke loud enough for others to hear. This human, Cadet Hyun, led us against impossible odds. He turned a writing instrument into a weapon. He studied the enemy while we fought them. He found victory where none should exist. He is proof that warriors come in many forms. The applause grew louder. Hyun felt overwhelmed. He was not comfortable with attention. He preferred to observe, to learn, to work quietly. But he understood that this moment was important. Not just for him, but for humanity's place in the galactic community. The weeks that followed were busy. Hyun's ankle healed slowly. During his recovery, he was visited by instructors, scientists, and military strategists. All wanted to hear about his methods. How did he observe under combat stress? How did he synthesize information so quickly? How did he identify the Vrexil's weaknesses? Hyun answered their questions patiently, but he always emphasized the same point. It was not just me. It was the entire team. Mirai provided firepower. Brock provided strength. Vesh provided the crystal. Each cadet contributed. My role was simply to observe and coordinate. But the visitors knew better. They had read his report. They had seen his notes. What Hyun called simply observing was actually rapid threat assessment, creative problem-solving, and tactical innovation at the highest level. 6 weeks after the Kepler-7 mission, Hyun was called to the Academy Director's office. Director Korvash was an ancient being from a species called the Eternals, creatures who lived for thousands of years and rarely spoke. Cadet Hyun, Korvash's voice was like wind through canyons. You have changed something fundamental in this academy. Before you, we taught that combat was about strength, speed, and firepower. You have shown us that combat is also about understanding. I only did what seemed logical, Director, Hyun said. Exactly, Korvash replied. Logic, reason, observation. These are now recognized as weapons equal to any plasma cannon. We are creating a new course of study, applied xenobiology and combat scenarios. We would like you to help design this course. Hyun was stunned. Sir, I am just a cadet. You are the cadet who defeated the Vrexil with a pen, Korvash said. I think you are qualified. The new course was implemented the following semester. Hyun found himself teaching alongside experienced instructors, sharing his methods with cadets from across the galaxy. Mirai joined the teaching staff as well, focusing on unconventional warfare and adaptive tactics. On the first day of class, Hyun stood before 30 cadets representing 20 different species. They looked at him with curiosity, some with skepticism. After all, he was young, recently promoted from their ranks, and he was human. Hyun held up a pen. This is not just a writing instrument, he began. This is humanity's greatest weapon. The ability to record, to learn, to understand, and then to use that understanding to overcome any obstacle.